You know, sometimes you just need a change, so here we are. We've been doing videos about older history for the most part, so I decided to kind of move forward on the timeline to more modern times, and we have landed on the beachheads of World War II. Also, I don't know if you have seen this guy on the board. I kind of forgot he was there, and I don't even really know how he got there in the first place, but I kind of like him, so I think I'm going to keep him around and call him Roger. Say what's up to the folks, Roger. He's a little shy. So this video today is a viewer suggestion, and it's just the first video in a series of 4 videos I've been told. So the plan is to do this one today, and then we're going to do the other 3 parts kind of in a series, but I'm going to do it every other video because there are some other things that I still want to fit in. Now here's the thing. I'm no stranger to World War II. I have studied it to a certain extent, but it mostly involves the American parts of the war. So when it comes to the Eastern Front with the German and the Soviet armies, I really don't know what happened other than Germany lost eventually. Oh, and that a lot of people died. Like, a lot. But I am really looking forward to this one because for some unexplainable reason, I really love stuff having to do with the military. I don't know why, it's just a thing that I've been fascinated with ever since I was a little kid. I mean, you have no idea. Maybe I'll tell you the story one day about how I forced my younger brothers to go through boot camp, and I was their drill sergeant. Yes, this really happened. Now granted, the boot camp took place in our backyard and I was like 9 years old or something. But I made those suckers run that obstacle course and then do push-ups if they didn't complete it in time. The perks of being a big sister. So anyway, the point is, that's how much I loved the military growing up. I used to watch all of the military movies like Tora Tora Tora, John Wayne and Iwo Jima, Bridge on the River Kwai, Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers, Sergeant York, Hogan's Heroes, which I know isn't a movie, but you know, it has to do with World War II. I Dream of Jeannie, which I know is a stretch and I know it's not a movie, but you know, it's about the Air Force and NASA and all of that stuff, which I really liked. I even took a couple of courses in college about the military. One was US military history, the other was about the Civil War, which brings me to my favorite war movie of all time, Gettysburg. I mean, come on. One of my grandfathers was in the Navy and he fought in the Korean War and was a frogman and was a champion boxer on his ship. I don't know how you do it. So needless to say, whenever we have a video that has to do with war or the military, especially getting into the more modern era, I look forward to it. So without further ado, let's get into the Eastern Front of World War II.
Europe, summer 1941. Germany had secured most of Central and Western Europe, with only Great Britain remaining defiant on the islands. The only potential threat to Germany in Europe was its former ally, the Soviet Union. In order to break the stalemate with Britain and make Germany's strategic position indisputable, Hitler decided to cripple the military capabilities of the Soviet Union and seize its natural resources. Germany planned to achieve this goal by capturing most of the European part of the Soviet Union before the onset of winter 1941. The main attack would take...
So, my first question about this is, how was the Soviet Union perceived in the world at this time? Because I'm just thinking that Hitler has a lot of confidence in his army if he figures he can invade this huge country. He's got to know, not only is it a huge landmass, but it's also a huge army. Was the Soviet Union looked at as kind of like an easy thing to overcome, or did Hitler know that it was going to be extremely difficult and just decided to go for it anyway?
Would take place in the center and be directed towards Moscow with auxiliary attacks.
Wait a second, also, what is his name? Oh my word. Arkhangelsk? Arkhangelsk? No. Astrakhan? Did I say that right? Probably not. What is that referring to? I don't know. I've never heard of that before. Is that like a region, or those cities kind of along there? How did that name come about?
Attacks in the north and south. By the middle of June 1941, the Germans had almost completed the preparations and the invasion was about to begin. Meanwhile, the Soviet forces were unaware of what was coming and were ill-prepared to resist the German invasion. First, we'll look at the southern sector. The Soviets had deployed their strongest units in the south, having 1,200,000 men between the Pripyat marshes and the Black Sea. They were to be confronted by the Army Group South that was of roughly
oh my
the same
word.
strength. The first
Those numbers are crazy. 970,000 men, 339, so they're well over like 1.2 million soldiers.
The first objective of the Axis troops was securing the western Ukraine. On June 22nd, the invasion began. The Soviets immediately gathered their armed forces and met the German spearhead with a massive counterattack in the area of Dubno.
Was Ukraine part of the Soviet Union at this
point? Due to the
point?
lack of combat readiness of the units involved, it failed, and the Soviets lost most of their tanks. The German advance continued, and this created a threat of encirclement to the Soviet troops.
Okay, I'm just looking at all of this stuff on the map here. I don't know what all of these numbers are. The circles and the squares with the numbers on them. I don't know what that means, and they have like little X's on the top of them as well. Are these like company numbers? No, that can't be, because I see repeated numbers here. I feel like this video needs a legend so that I understand how to watch it.
Soviet troops in the south, and they have to be withdrawn from the exposed position. After the main attack had tied down the Soviet reserves, the Axis forces in Romania joined the offensive. The main
That's so cool how it's
now
like so
made a dash
fluid
towards the
moving.
east, and this made Soviet command think that the main German effort was directed towards Kiev. However, the Germans had stuck to their original plan and turned south. When the Soviets realized the German intentions, it was already too late to withdraw their forces, and the Germans encircled and destroyed many of the Soviet formations near the town of Uman. The Soviets now abandoned western Ukraine and retreated to the eastern bank of the river Dnieper. They deployed the first wave of freshly mobilized troops to establish a strong defense on the river line and also cling to the port of Odessa. At the same time, operations were being carried out in the north, where 1.5 million German soldiers from army groups north and center were facing 1 million Soviet soldiers. In the beginning of the invasion, the army group center was...
Okay, down there, that number looks like there's a missing comma or something. I'm guessing that is supposedly 1,022,000, because he said there's 1.5 million up here on the north. Here's the thing about World War II, it's just that the numbers are staggering. The amount of people that were fighting, and then of course the amount of people that died as well. I mean, I think it's number-wise like the worst war in human history as far as deaths go, both soldiers and civilians. Before you recommend it, I have seen the Fallen of World War II video before, so I know that the Soviet Union had like upwards of 20 million people dead estimated, which included civilians and soldiers, so I know the numbers are staggering. In that video they seem more like just statistics, but when you look at it this way, where you're kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of it and you're seeing the more details of the battles, it kind of makes those numbers more realistic to you. It's just insane.
Was to encircle Soviet forces at the border and then advance towards Smolensk and Moscow. Meanwhile, Army Group North was to advance directly towards Leningrad, threatening to trap the Soviet forces between them and the sea.
I didn't realize that Moscow was kind of that close to Europe. See, us Americans are a little hazy on the geography in this part of the world. For some reason, I figured Moscow was like a little bit further in. I don't know, maybe it is a little bit further in Russia. This map might be making everything look a little bit more compressed because I'm not seeing like hard border lines like we're used to on maps.
On June 22nd, the Germans attacked. The Soviet Western Front was deployed forward, and during the first days of the war, the German forces encircled most of its formations near the towns of Bialystok and Minsk. In the Baltics, the Soviet counterattacks were defeated in the Battle of Raseiniai, and then they attempted to pull back and establish a defensive line on Daugava River. But the Germans reached the river before them and pushed onwards, threatening the Soviet units in the west with encirclement. At the same time, Army Group Center had finished encircling the Soviet Western Front, and its infantry units began to reduce the pockets, while its armored forces advanced eastwards almost unopposed. The Soviets attempted to plug the gap by deploying most of their pre-war reserves to counter them, but it was not enough, and as the German offensive continued, their armor broke through the Soviet lines and trapped these units near Smolensk. By that time, the first wave of Soviet mobilization was complete, and the Soviets used these formations to block further German advance and attempted to free the encircled troops. However, the performance of these newly created units was lackluster, and they were unable to liberate the pocket. The Germans managed to close it up.
Oh my word, 309,000 POWs? I mean, what do you even do with that many people? I mean, I guess you would probably just do away with them, right? You don't want to house and take care of that many POWs. I'm telling you, these numbers are crazy.
And eliminated. The Germans had gained the upper hand in the central part of the front, and now they were faced with two options. they could continue the push towards Moscow immediately, or secure the flanks of Army Group Center first and then continue the offensive eastwards. They decided to do the latter, and the armored formations of Army Group Center were sent to aid neighboring army groups. During this time, battles
Look
had
at all
been
these
raging in
roads,
the north,
though.
where Army Group North had failed to pull out large encirclements,
It's like a
and
spider
their
web
progress
almost.
was slowed down by the Soviet counterattacks and bad infrastructure. Nevertheless, they were making slow but steady progress, and after securing their left flank, they reached the approaches to Leningrad. When the help from Army Group Center arrived, they were able to perform the final push and cut off the land-based communications to the city. Further north, Finland had entered the war against the Soviet Union on June 25th, and the Finnish troops took advantage
Oh,
of
wait. Huh. So, Finland is attached to Russia by land? I know, I'm sorry, I'm just a dumb American who's not too bright with geography. Honestly, I've seen a lot of maps of Europe before, but I've never really zoned in on this particular area to kind of see the details of it. I always thought that Finland was cut off from Russia by water, like completely. I didn't realize that there were these kind of land bridges. But I guess Russia kind of goes up into that peninsula a little bit too. I don't know, you learn something new every day.
of the Soviet defeats by taking back the lands lost in the Winter War. After that, they established forward defensive positions between the lakes. Even further north, the Finnish and German troops attempted to capture the Soviet port city of Murmansk and cut the Murmansk railway in order
realize
to sever
Russia
the
went all the
Allied
way
supply
up there
route
like
to the
that.
Soviet Union. However, their attacks became bogged down in the rough terrain short of their objectives. The front became static. Meanwhile, the other armored units of the Army Group Center were sent to help Army Group South. The Soviets had anticipated that the Germans would continue their attack towards Moscow and concentrated their troops on this direction, which allowed the German armored formations to push back the weaker Soviet units on their southern flank. The German advance southwards forced the Soviets to abandon their forward positions in the Pripyat marshes to shorten their line. In Ukraine, the Soviet troops were occupying a strong defensive position, with their flanks resting on the Dnieper River in the west and south and the marshes in the north. Yet,
This
the
animation
Panthers
has
from
to
Army
take
Group
a
Center
really long
were
time to do.
bypassing the marshes from the east and advanced into the Soviet rear. The Soviets thought that the German spearhead was overextended and could be contained. However, unbeknownst to them, the armored formations of the Army Group South had secretly crossed the Dnieper from the south into a German breachhead and now broke through towards north to link up with the spearhead. As the
Beachhead?
groups met,
Where the heck is a beachhead in the middle of the land like that? Is it like on the river or something?
most of the Soviet units in the central Ukraine became encircled. 750,000
Whoa, 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 whoa,
men
whoa, whoa,
were
whoa,
trapped.
whoa, whoa. I thought 309,000 POWs was crazy, but this is like twice that. Oh my gosh. I mean, I can't even imagine what you do with that many people. I mean, I know that Germany kept some POWs around. I would imagine they killed a lot of them too. See, I don't really know exactly the details of how all that went down, but I do know from Hogan's Heroes that a few of them were kept around, so.
Trapped in the pocket. When the pocket had been liquidated, the Soviet forces in Ukraine had been severely weakened. After these operations, the flanks of Army Group Center were secure, but now the Germans didn't have enough time.
Word. Look at that. I mean, you have Soviet soldiers just lined up as like they're like a solid wall going through the entire border. Or, I mean, it's not really the border, but, you know, the front of the war. I can't even fathom how many soldiers it takes to do that. That is insane.
Enough time to reach the objectives set in the beginning of the campaign, and they decided to go for more limited goals. In order to reach them, they began a full-scale attack along the whole front. In the south, the Soviet resistance had been crippled with the recent encirclement, and this allowed the Germans to carry out another encirclement, trapping part of the Soviet forces on the coast of the Black Sea. Then they pushed
Germans
onwards
are good at
and
that little
established their control
move, aren't
over the
they?
resource-rich areas of the eastern Ukraine and conquered the Crimean Peninsula, with Soviets abandoning Odessa but clinging on to the port of Sevastopol. At the same time, the German forces were pursuing their objectives in the north. Their goal was to sever the remaining supply route to Leningrad and link up with the Finnish forces. The initial advance was successful and reached its first goal by cutting the railway line supplying the city. The main German effort was in the center. All this time the Soviets had anticipated
just
an
look
attack
at
on
that.
Moscow and had deployed 1,250,000
Oh
mobilized troops
my
to the
gosh.
sector.
Like, what does that even look like? 1.2 million soldiers.
During the German operations on the flanks, they had even somewhat managed to push Army Group Center back to improve their defensive perimeter, but by the end of September, the German armor had finally returned to the center and proceeded to carry out a new attack.
Million?
Once again, near the towns of Vyazma and Bryansk, the Soviet troops were encircled, and this resulted in halving the Soviet strength on the front. After reducing the pockets, the Germans closed their distance to Moscow. Then they attempted.
I want to learn more about that maneuver where they're surrounding these Soviet troops and encircling them and then taking them captive. The Germans are extremely good at doing that, apparently.
To encircle Moscow with a two-pronged attack, but by that time the long advance had exhausted their offensive capabilities and the weather had become severely cold. The Soviets managed to halt their advance, and although they didn't have much superiority
they're like in
numbers,
Moscow.
the Soviet proficiency in winter combat allowed them to carry out a counterattack. The Germans were forced to abandon their vulnerable forward positions on the flanks and pulled back in order to shorten the front line. During the retreat,
look at that! Look at how dense the lines of Soviet troops are right there. Oh my word! Like, I didn't know that they got that close to Moscow. I know that Germany got into Russia, but I had no idea they had gotten that far. I mean, they were practically in Moscow. And I have to hand it to the Soviet troops. Like, they had to have put up a huge fight. I mean, you look at how dense the line is right there, which makes total sense because they're defending their capital. Like, if that had gone down, then they probably would have lost the war, I would imagine. You know, Germany takes Moscow and it's over at that point. Like, you're fighting for your country. Like, that one little battle or bit right there, I mean, that was do or die, basically, for the Soviet Union. Like, you just have to admire the Soviet troops at that point. Their grit and determination, I mean, had to be off the scales in order to keep Germany from taking that city.
And some of their heavy equipment. At the same time, the German attempt to cut off Leningrad had also failed, and they had to retreat to their starting positions, and the supply line to Leningrad was restored.
How important was Leningrad
to
all of this?
The Soviets, forcing the Germans to abandon their forward positions in Rostov. The first year of the war was over. The Soviets had stopped the Germans far from their initial goals, but at a great cost.
This is just the first year of the war, and all of this has happened already. Gosh. See, pretty much all of my knowledge about World War II is more in the Western Front, but even then, I feel like there's so much to learn. And then also in the Pacific Theater, but this is like the first time I'm really taking a look at what happened more in the Eastern part of the war. And the more I watch, the more I'm coming to the conclusion that it was definitely like the worst part of it.
To their own military capabilities. The Red Army had been decimated, and it would take a year or more to fully rebuild and re-equip the army. The Germans wanted to use this window of opportunity and were sending most of their available forces to the Eastern Front to deliver a knockout punch in the following year. 1942 would be the decisive year of the war.
Okay. Well, that was a crazy video. I feel like I learned a lot about World War II that I did not know before, and I have a much deeper appreciation now for kind of that part of the war and the Soviet army and what they had to go through dealing with Germany. Now, obviously the Soviet Union and America have not always seen eye to eye with things, but even so, I have to really admire the Soviet troops. I mean, kudos to them for doing what they did. And I guess they also kind of lucked out with the winter because right as Germany was about to take Moscow, winter set in, and that did give the advantage to the Soviet troops. But thanks for suggesting this video. I am really looking forward to what happens next. We got more World War II coming up. Thanks once again to all of you who have subscribed and have been leaving comments down below with video suggestions and answering my questions. I've been learning a lot from you guys, and I hope that you keep it up. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. We've got the other 3 parts coming your way before too long. So as always, stay tuned. Say goodbye, Roger. We'll work on it. We'll see you next time.